As the late Joseph Campbell once stated, our stories are a reflection of our culture. As the culture changes, so do our stories. With myths that have survived through the millennia, it can only be expected that they evolve along with the culture. The problem with this is the original intention of these parables and myths become lost in translation. The wisdom of the past is forgotten. None more so than the characterization and depiction of the Greek god of the dead, Hades. Just hearing the name, images of a satanic man come to the forefront. A sullen, dark figure that plots domination, kidnaps maidens, and tricks mortals to claim their souls. Depictions such as this stand forefront in my generation, within Disney's Hercules, Clash of the Titans, Percy Jackson, and various others. The depiction I want to focus on is found in one of the game series that has influenced our concept of mythology in the gaming world, God of War. It will be important to distinguish that the name Hades refers to two things. One, the Greek god himself, and two, the physical realm of Hades. The etymology of Hades simply means the unseen. This refers to the realm of Hades and the god Hades differently. The physical location, being the land of the dead, cannot be seen by the living. This implies it is always there right next to us, but until our thread is cut, we are unaware of it. During the Titanomachy, Cyclops crafted and gifted Hades with a helmet of invisibility, which would allow him to move through the realm of the living unseen. In order to show off how the mythology changed, I will do a comparison between the original interpretation of Hades and the version we see in God of War. The realm of Hades within the game is shown initially as a hellscape. Oceans of fire, souls falling down in anguish, and tormentors everywhere. Within God of War 3, it is modified to include a place of darkness, the fires of Tartaros being described as a separate location within Hades. However, the gloomy, dark region is designed like a prison to torture the souls there. In the original stories, Hades was never described as a place of hellish torment with fires and torturers there to rend the souls of the damned for eternity. Hades is a realm that encompasses the afterlife in its entirety. As easy as it is to conceive that Olympus was heaven and Hades was hell, both the Greek version of heaven, hell, and everything in between resided within Hades. For a little geography, let's break down the main regions of the underworld. After departing Earth and before arriving in Hades, the souls of the dead passed through Erebos. Literally meaning darkness, Erebos was the passage between the mortal realm and the realm of the dead. Guided by Hermes, the soul would be brought to the shores of the river Acheron. After being ferried across, the soul came before the three judges who tried the soul. From there, they were sent to one of three parts of Hades. Tartaros, a place of punishment, the plains of Asphodel, a place of no joy but no pain, or the fields of Elysia, which was the heaven state and set aside for those who had accomplished great deeds in life, or otherwise were beloved by the gods. Within Hades, there are 5 rivers. The river of woe, Acheron, was the current that brought souls to and from Hades. The river of hate, Styx, formed the border between death and the afterlife. After all, one could be dead but never enter the afterlife, trapped in Erebos. As an aside, the goddess Styx was the mother of Kratos within lore. The river of fire, Phlegethon, was the current flowing into Tartaros. Fire is used thematically to represent the process of purification. Raw metal is impure, and only by being placed in the heart of the flames can it be purified. In the same process, being passed through the flames would purify the soul. Most of those who ended up in Tartaros only resided in there for 1 year. Cocytus, the river of lamentation, flowed out of Tartaros and carried souls back for further judgment. Within the Greek mythos, souls were allowed to leave this version of hell once they had learned the lesson. The final river was Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. It bordered the Elysian fields, and the souls sent there were required to drink from the waters, which caused them to forget all the suffering and deeds throughout their lives before being given passage to a place of unencumbered bliss. Within the game, the imagery of Hades, the god, is of a well-built man covered with chains, spikes protruding from his flesh, and a helmet fashioned like a furnace with a flame burning within. He is a sadistic god and easy to temper. In terms of personality, imagine Pinhead from the Hellraiser series, an individual who enjoys torturing souls, tearing them apart for a twisted sense of pleasure. The claws of Hades gives the god the power to rip souls from their bodies, and though not stated outright, it is implied that every soul he collects increases his power, similar to Freddy in the Elm Street franchise. This would give him the motivation to collect as many souls as possible, naturally or by force. In classic mythology, this is a severe departure from his characterization. Hades was a stoic and rigid man, ordained with a dark beard and usually depicted on his throne. Being the god representing the realm of the dead, he would not allow souls to leave with few exception. In that sense, they were prisoners, but not in the constant state of torture as God of War depicted. Any and all torture was exclusively reserved for Tartaros, whose occupants were souls who committed specific crimes, such as sins against the family or the gods themselves. Even souls who had sinned during life, but recognized their misdeeds, were spared from Tartaros, so long as they lived the rest of their lives well, having repented for their sin. Rather than being the sadistic prison keeper as depicted in God of War, the Hades in the literature could be reasoned with. The two primary stories of him dealing with mortals is with Heracles and Orpheus. The first desiring to take Cerberus back to King Eurystheus for his final trial, the other wishing to return his wife's departed soul from Hades and return her to the land of the living. In both cases, Hades conceded so long as they proved themselves, while Heracles succeeded in wrestling the beast, guiding him to Earth and returning him without any harm coming upon the Hound. Orpheus was unable to pass Hades' test. His test was never to look back to the soul he was guiding out of Hades into the realm of the living. Hades was willing to release the soul, but when Orpheus turned around to make sure his wife was with him, he claimed her for a second time. In this sense, he is certainly a strict ruler over his realm, but fair and never cruel. Despite this, the ancient Greeks feared Hades as we fear death to this day. As discussed, the difference between the modern depiction of Hades, as shown within the game, and the original literature are vast. From a strict but fair ruler to a sadistic torturer. From a place of reward, punishment, and the opportunity of redemption, to a place of hellish torment and imprisonment. Joseph Campbell understood that as our culture changes, so do our stories. So what changed in our culture that could have led this reimagining of Hades? While this is only a personal opinion, I believe that the translation of Western theologies to English are responsible. Most literature in Western cultures have a basis in Judeo-Christian imagery. Even those who do not practice a religion understand the concepts of heaven and hell, of God and the devil. So when we retell older stories, we interpret them through the lens of Judeo-Christian symbolism without even thinking about what the original storytellers intended. As is usual when translating books from older languages, some things are just lost in translation. Before English, the Bible was written in Greek and Hebrew. Another YouTuber, Ask a Christian, investigated this and isolated every reference to hell in English, and compared it to the words and context used in the Greek and Hebrew translations. These included references such as Hades, Tartaros, Sheol, and Gehenna. I have linked her videos in the description below if anyone is curious to expand upon this topic. Hades and Sheol are relatively interchangeable, meaning simply death or the grave. So if in the Greek translation a person said, "Send me to the grave," it would be translated to English as, "Send me to hell." Obviously, this isn't what was intended by these words. Tartaros was simply a prison for the Titans awaiting judgment after they were cast there by Zeus during the Titanomachy. Gehenna is the only word referring to a place of fire. However, even that is not a place of eternal damnation. The Greek Gehenna is transcribed from the Hebraic Gehinnom, which literally means the Valley of Hinnom. As referred to in the book of Joshua, this was a garbage dump outside of Jerusalem that was kept burning to keep the stench from overpowering the city. The corpses of executed criminals and unburied dead were cast into the fires of Gehenna to ensure that a disease did not spread. This ended up being mistranslated and assisted in the imagery of bodies being cast into the fires of hell. Another cause for the change in imagery was presented in the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, specifically the first book, Inferno. That poem helped to craft our modern concept of hell. With all this in mind, it is understandable why the modern depiction of Hades portrays a demonic and sadistic warden of souls that delighted in their torture, despite being an inaccurate representation. God of War did a wonderful job introducing gamers into the world of mythology. My goal for this new series for Gaming University is to take the gods and entities within the God of War series and break down who they really were. Let me know which god you would like to see in the next video. See you then.